Remember my word that I said to you. The servant is not greater than his master. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. John 15:20. And Big James was the first disciple of Jesus to be martyred for his faith. And he is among the two disciples whose death is accounted for in the New Testament. After the ascension of Jesus, the disciples scattered to different parts of the world, and Big James went to Galilee to spread the Christian faith. According to the book of Acts, King Herod, not the one we've been watching on The Chosen, has James killed with a sword to please the Jewish people as part of his campaign of persecution of the church. So Big James was beheaded 11 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, around the year 44. The same King Herod was able to take Peter as a prisoner, but Peter escaped. More on where he went and how he died later. Big James was the first martyr among the apostles, but he wasn't the first one to die. Judas is the other disciple whose death is mentioned in the New Testament. However, there are two different accounts about how he died. According to the Gospel of Matthew, Judas killed himself. After seeing that Jesus was condemned to death by the Sanhedrin, Judas repented. He took back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying that he had betrayed someone innocent. He threw the silvers in the temple, departed, and hanged himself. But the book of Acts gives a different account. It says that Judas never repented. Instead, he bought a field with the money he got from the Jewish religious leaders, but he was not able to enjoy his time on it. He burst open in the middle and his bowels gushed out, and the field that he bought became known as Akeldama, the field of blood. Now, since the deaths of none of the other disciples are mentioned in the Bible, we have to rely on reports and legends about the others, which are not always reliable. But still, it's safe to say that Jesus' disciples went far and beyond in the world to spread the message, and it was very likely that most of them faced brutal deaths. Nathanael. The tradition suggests that he went as far as India to spread the message but the tradition differs about the exact circumstances around his death. In one of these accounts, he's drowned in the ocean. In another, he's crucified upside down, which is a theme we will commonly come across. In a third account, Nathanael is actually decapitated after being skinned alive. The implication is obvious. His death was a violent one, but unfortunately, none of these accounts have any historical data to back them up. Thaddeus. Little is known about his whereabouts or final days, but it is estimated that he preached in areas like Parthia, modern-day Iran, and Armenia. As one tradition tells us, he was clubbed to death and his head was shattered with an axe, which is why he's usually depicted with a club or axe. Another tradition says that he was actually crucified. It is usually believed that Thaddeus and Simon Z were preaching partners and they traveled together. Some accounts say that they also died together. According to tradition, Simon was sawn in half. That is why in Christian art, he is depicted with a saw. But according to Saint Basil the Great, who wrote an account in the 4th century, Simon died peacefully at Edessa. So you see how there are differing accounts on this issue, and it's not really possible to tell which one gives a truer account. Let's talk about Thomas. It is said that he went to India and brought Christianity there and was killed with a spear by 4 soldiers. Acts of Thomas, an early 3rd century text, says that a king becomes angry when Thomas converts the queen, the king's son, his sister-in-law, and her friend. Seeing this, the king orders his soldiers to take Thomas outside the city, where they stab him to death with spears. Peter. After running away from King Herod, as I previously mentioned, it is known that Peter traveled to many places to spread the gospel, and he ended up in Rome. A letter from the late 1st century says that Peter died a martyr in the city, but it doesn't give the reason for his death. The Acts of Peter, written in the 2nd century, reveals that Peter is arrested and condemned to be crucified. He asks to be crucified upside down as a symbolic gesture, and the Romans are happy to oblige. Little James. The tradition says that little James traveled to Egypt to preach and died there. One tradition says that he was beaten to death while preaching the gospel there. If you remember The Chosen Season 4, Episode 7, where there was a flash forward to the old Mary Magdalene and Matthew brought the news of little James's death in the hands of a Roman king in Lower Egypt. Speaking of Matthew, let's also talk about him. The only sources we have about the end of his life come from 2nd century Christian authors who say that Matthew first preached to Jews in Judea and then traveled to other places, including Ethiopia. He is killed there with an axe by the order of a king after Matthew publicly scolds the king for wanting to marry a nun. A daughter of a previous king, Matthew, had converted. In a similar story told in a 4th century text called Acts of Philip, Philip converts the wife of a leader of a city. The leader doesn't like this, so he orders him to be crucified upside down. In this account, Nathanael is also there with Philip and is crucified in the same way. But as you can see, the trope of converting a leader's wife or close family member is commonly observed in these texts, which reduces their reliability. Andrew. Tradition tells us that Andrew was also crucified, but in a different manner. Acts of Andrew places him in a Greek city in the year 60 and says that Andrew was tied to the cross, not nailed. Another tradition, however, says that Andrew was crucified on an X-shaped cross, something he requested because he didn't think he was worthy of dying in the same way as Jesus. John. Many accounts believe that John outlived all the other disciples and died of old age in the city of Ephesus in modern-day Turkey. If we take this to be true, John is the only apostle who did not die as a martyr. Mary Magdalene. Of course, I was going to talk about her. As The Chosen showed in season 4, Mary goes into seclusion in a cave where she spends the last few decades of her life and dies. But this is the account according to the French tradition, as they believe the cave is located in France. According to the Eastern tradition, Mary went to Ephesus with John and died there. Regardless of the tradition, it seems she died a peaceful death. If you want to find out more about The Chosen, check out this video.